Good afternoon, Council President, members of the City Council and city staff community. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll be presenting on behalf of the Police Department. I also have with me virtually Deputy Director Suttle, who will be assisting me on segments of this presentation around the budget, our efforts on health and wellness, as well as recruitment.
Before you start, Acting Chief, I do want to just briefly and publicly say thank you for stepping into the Acting Chief role. I think it's really important at this time in Oakland for the community to recognize that you are once again stepping into that leadership position to lead our city and our police department with all of our officers and our civilian staff. And I want the public in particular to know that we take seriously public safety, and that I know that you, our sworn and our civilian staff, are continuing to do the important work day in, day out to keep our community safe. And so I did want to make sure that we publicly acknowledged you and thank you for being in that important role during this time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Council President. So I'll take you through this presentation. I'm going to first go over just some structure from our strategic plan as far as the mission and our top 5 goals in our strategic plan. I'm going to align my presentation with those goals. Also talk about how we're organized, the budget, and some of our strategies, not just for crime reduction, but as well as building community trust. So as you can see on the screen, our mission is to provide a police service focused on public safety and the sanctity of life, to hold ourselves accountable to a high standard of conduct, efficiency, and efficacy, and to promote mutual respect between the department and the communities of Oakland. Our 5 strategic goals that are in alignment with our mission is to reduce crime, to improve public safety, improve community engagement, and strengthen community trust, develop and foster a high-quality, involved, and respected workforce, demonstrate sustained compliance with the negotiated settlement agreement, prepare for the future of police service delivery. And you'll see in this presentation that my talking points will align with those goals. But first, I think it's important to see how our department is organized and structured. We have 5 bureaus in the department. The bureaus are led by either a deputy chief who cover the 4 bureaus of operations, risk management, and investigations, and then a deputy director who's a professional staff covering services. As you can see, before the bureaus and as a direct report to the Office of Chief of Police, directly reporting to me is our ceasefire division. We do that by intent because sometimes crime strategies can differ among the areas, but our ceasefire strategy is our department-wide overarching strategy for violent crime. And when we are looking at addressing violence that could be pervasive throughout the entire city and not just lined to an area, having the ceasefire division report to me brings up a higher form of accountability and the ability to adjust resources without running into area-specific problems that you might see created by silos when you have an area command. But first, for our Bureau of Field Operations 1 and 2, they're led respectively by Deputy Chief Beer in BFO 1 and Deputy Chief Mendoza in BFO 2. Both of those bureaus house our 6 areas. BFO 1 has areas 1 through 3, and BFO 2 has areas 4 through 6. Area 1 is West Oakland, which incorporates the downtown all the way up to a little bit of West Grand, and then when you cut over to the 980 freeway up to 40th Street. Area 2 is North Oakland, which covers everything from West Grand and that 40th Street cutoff all the way north into the hills, along with the Emeryville and Berkeley borders to the west and north, and Piedmont to the east. Area 3 is the area just east of the lake, south of Piedmont to the water, and to the east, 25th Avenue. For Area 4, it's pretty much 25th Avenue to High Street, from the south to the water, all the way up to the hills. Area 5 consists of east of High Street to 82nd Avenue, south of the 580 freeway, again to the waterline. And then Area 6 incorporates 82nd Avenue all the way down to the airport, east to San Leandro, and again up into the Oakland Hills. Those are our area structures. And what is worth noting about the areas is when you look at our sworn staff, which we are at 698 out of an allotted 726 with 28 vacancies. And our professional staff, we are at 277.5 filled positions out of 339.5 filled positions. When you combine our total staffing numbers, the patrol areas are areas 1 through 6 make up about 40% deployment of all our staff in the department. So it's by far those 6 areas, and the numbers that we utilize in those areas make up a vast majority of where our professional staff or officers sit. If you isolate out the professional staff, when you look at just at sworn officers, it takes roughly 360 officers and sergeants to have patrol run day to day, and their day-to-day activities really are designed around 911 response, emergency response, preventative patrols, other quality of life concerns that might align with ongoing crime concerns, whether there's burglaries, auto thefts, and the like. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into our crime reduction piece. But I want to at least set the structure that the 6 areas do represent a majority of where our staff sit in the organization. To give you, again, a little bit of additional staffing statistics, on a day-to-day basis in patrol, we can range anywhere from a 10 to 20% vacancy rate due to different types of leave, sick leave, vacation leave, ongoing training. And so part of the need to ensure that we have beat coverage is to ensure that we have not only officers in every beat, but additional officers to absorb any of those 20% vacancies on a day-to-day basis, so we do not have open beats throughout the city. For those that remember, prior to 2022, we had 5 areas, and we were seeing a lot of times high numbers of calls standing, sometimes in the areas of 200 plus. A lot of them were standing calls in East Oakland. And in 2022, the chief brought an Area 6 plan, which is not a new plan. We had a 6-area plan historically in the city of Oakland, but we rolled that out in 2022, and we saw a correlated reduction in call standing across the city, at least particularly in the frequency of call standing. In addition to the areas and patrol in the Bureau of Field Operations, we also have our community resource officers assigned under those bureaus in areas 1 through 3. The CROs fall under BFO 1 for areas 4, 5, and 6. The CROs fall in BFO 2. Again, I will talk a little bit more about their work in the upcoming slides. BFO 2 also has our support operations, which includes some of our support functions around mental health, traffic enforcement, air support, tactical team operations, which is not a permanent assignment, it is a collateral assignment, which means we do not have officers permanently assigned to the tactical team. They actually serve in different functions throughout the organization. But if there is a need for tactical response that arises, they are coordinated through the support operations unit or section, I should say. Our canine program is housed under support operations, as well as our alcohol beverage action team, our liaison to our marijuana and cannabis dispensaries and businesses. And then we also have our, I think I mentioned already, our air support in the support operations. Bureau of Risk Management, again, run by Deputy Chief Wong, has, and you hear sirens in the back, forgive me. Let that pass for a second. Okay. In the Bureau of Risk Management, we have our Office of Internal Accountability. It was formerly the Office of Inspector General. However, with the city's Office of Inspector General, we transitioned the naming convention of it to the Office of Internal Accountability. That office is primarily made up of professional staff auditors who do regular auditing for the police department. They have certain audits that are required by policy, certain audits that are done in support of the negotiated settlement agreement and our sustainability, as well as additional audits that could be directed by the chief if there's some area that needs to be reviewed or inspected. We also have under the Bureau of Risk Management our Internal Affairs Division, They conduct internal investigations, particularly high-level investigations. They also have a unit that intakes complaints, and we also have a unit that does outside IID investigations that are sent out to what we call the division level. So internal affairs does not have the capacity to investigate every single IA complaint that comes through. They do retain the most serious cases, while some of the additional cases that are still complaints and are important nonetheless, they are sent out to our patrol supervisors to conduct investigations, and those investigations are reviewed by a unit within internal affairs to ensure sufficiency of investigation and quality. And some is certainly important to our compliance with the NSA. Our internal affairs also works closely as far as coordinating investigations with our CPRA, although they are separate and independent investigations that are conducted out of the CPRA. They certainly have to have a working relationship, as some of these cases could be complex or complicated. And so there is a communication bridge between our internal affairs and the Community Police Review Agency. Additionally, under the Bureau of Risk Management is our training division, which is responsible for the coordination of our recruit academies. We do have a post-certified recruit academy. Post is police officers and standards and training. To have an in-house academy, you have to be certified by post. Our academies are certified by post, and so we're able to hold our own academies, which I think is important, because holding our own academies allows us to set the standards that we expect out of our police officers in service to our community, and we're not getting expectations or training that is outside the goals and the vision of not only the police department and the city government, but what is expected out of the values of the community. We also, in our training division, house our in-service training. We do have iterative training that is required legally for our sworn staff. We also conduct professional staff in-service training as well. And that in-service training can range from perishable skills training to de-escalation training, defensive tactics, law training, updated policy training, and the like. And then finally, in our Bureau of Risk Management, we have our PAS administrative unit. This is, again, a professional staff unit, no sworn assigned, but the PAS unit is a unit that engages in some of our early intervention, early warning. So it does a peer group threshold comparison for individuals that might be at risk or a high propensity to engage in risk behavior. Our PAS unit does a review based off those indicators, and then it can trigger intervention measures, whether it's retraining, some form of accountability, close monitoring, or other actions that might help personnel member or supervisor or commander or manager accomplish their day-to-day missions while minimizing or managing risk. Fourth bureau is Bureau of Services that I mentioned. That is led by a professional staff director. Under the Bureau of Services, we have our communications division. Real briefly on our communications division, last year, it was the first year that we've seen this. Our communications division took in over 1 million calls into the communications division. And I want to be clear, we do not go to 1 million calls a year. Roughly, we go to about 28%. I think last year was around 276,000 calls that our patrol or our other special teams staff responded to. A vast majority, well over 200,000 were considered priority 1 and priority 2 calls for service. And just to define what those are, we prioritize calls based on the severity. Priority 1s are the more serious calls for service. It really is for a situation that includes imminent threat to serious injury. If there's a serious hazard that presents a life safety issue, or where there's an expedited response that could lead to the apprehension of a felony suspect, or the suspect is still on scene, whether it's a need to protect the life and public safety, or for fire EMS response. And we also include missing and runaway juveniles less than 16 years old as a priority 1 response because they are considered at risk. Priority 2 response is urgent but not an immediate emergency. It really is geared towards in-progress misdemeanors, something where maybe the suspect or individual is not on scene, but has a high chance of apprehension if we respond immediately. Certainly stolen vehicle reports would consider a priority 2 response, as well as it's situations where there is no weapons, but there could be a potential for violence or a hazard. So where priority 1 is the hazard or violence exists, a priority 2 would be a potential for violence or hazards. And then priority 3s would be considered what we call cold reports. We try and utilize some of our professional staff or police services technicians to support us on our priority 3 cold reports. But certainly a vast majority of our work that are done on an annual basis are in the priority 2 and priority 1 areas. And just to kind of give you a sense, I try to break down some really quick numbers. We saw in 2022, roughly 57,000 priority 1 calls in that year and 151,000 priority 2 calls. So if you break that down, how many calls per hour in the year, it's about 7 priority 1 calls an hour and 17 priority 2 calls an hour in the city of Oakland for 2022. So certainly a lot of activity and a lot of volume, not only coming into the communications division, but being pushed out to our staff in the field to provide a safety service to the community. Also under the Bureau of Services, we have our human resources, again, professionally staffed section that controls our personnel files, as well as facilitating a lot of our personnel management within the organization. Our fiscal services that handles internal payroll, records division, again, professionally staffed division that handles public records requests. Our background and recruiting unit, which is a hybrid of professional staff and sworn, that is responsible for bringing in new recruits and conducting backgrounds, as well as bringing in professional staff and conducting backgrounds. Our research and planning unit, which also houses our policy and publication, information technology, which works collaboratively with our city IT and our fleet management. And then finally, our final bureau is the Bureau of Investigations, led by Deputy Chief Lindsay, that houses 2 divisions, our Violent Crime Operations Center, which contains our Crime Gun Intelligence Center. And I'll talk a little bit about that in upcoming slides. Our operations teams, our Intel unit, and then our Criminal Investigations Division, which is broken up into 5 sections: homicide, felony assault, robbery and burglary, general crimes, and special victims. Special victims focuses on child abuse cases, sexual assault crimes, human trafficking, missing persons, crimes engaged with, again, juveniles, gender-based violence. And actually, I forgot to mention or include in this hierarchy, an additional division within the Bureau of Investigations is our crime lab. Again, all professional staff, and it is an accredited crime lab that does phenomenal work in the area of DNA analysis, ballistics testing, fingerprint analysis that support our investigations and our investigations division. Just to also give another staffing breakdown, I know I mentioned that we could have a 22% or 20% day-to-day patrol vacancy rate. In addition to that, we can see a 4% open or unfilled rate. Generally speaking, depending on how our attrition and staffing go, we are sitting at 28 sworn openings. On top of the 4% open positions, we do often see a 7% department-wide vacancy rate for individuals who are often extended leave on long-term illness, military leave, administrative leave, or long-term injury leave. So with our numbers, you usually can carve off anywhere from 50 to 100 that are on some sort of either daily leave or long-term leave. Moving on to the next slide, I want to ask Deputy Director Settle to step in and talk a little bit about our budget. Deputy Director Settle.
Good morning, Council President and other members of the Council. Deputy Director Kiana Settle. The Oakland Police Department's budget is a little over $355 million. 80% of the budget is allocated to personnel costs, which includes overtime, and then grants, operation and maintenance costs, and other personnel costs that are not connected to staffing and overtime comprise 15% of the Oakland Police Department's budget. And then money from parcel taxes and city ordinances that allow the department to collect various fees make up approximately 5% of the Oakland Police Department budget. So again, total budget $355,164,119.62 for the Oakland Police Department budget.
All right, thank you, Deputy Director. So I'm sure if there's additional questions, we can bring you back in for a budget discussion. So moving on, for our first top priority, reducing crime to improve public safety. I know prior to the presentation, there was a presentation by the Department of Violence Prevention, which are very close collaborators with us when it comes to addressing violent crime. We do have our ceasefire strategy, as I mentioned earlier, which is our primary crime, or I should say violence prevention strategy. And for ceasefire, it is a data-driven approach. It focuses on individuals that are at highest risk for gun violence, either on the offender end or on the victim end. The goal of our ceasefire program is to reduce gun violence, reduce recidivism, improve community relationships. As mentioned, we do partner with the Department of Violence Prevention, along with community-based organizations and our faith community, who are huge stakeholders in this strategy. And it's not a strategy that's just about enforcement. It is, again, about intaking information, finding the population that is at risk, and providing services to break that cycle of recidivism and violence, and give opportunity for a way out of a life of violence or risk of violence. We use our community partners to provide direct communications for individuals that could be engaged or be part of gun violence or retaliatory shootings. And we have a focused enforcement piece of how we address individuals that continue into gun violence despite having opportunities for services or direct communication. Certainly during 2020 and 2021 with COVID, it impacted the strategy. Part of our key components of strategy is a relationship approach through life coaching, mentorship, violence interruption, direct communication. And again, with COVID, having that ability to have those one-on-one type interfaces was a challenge. But as we came back to somewhat normalcy, as COVID started, the restrictions started lifting, and we were able to go back into more interface with the public, we were able to increase the frequency of our direct communication, as well as increase the number of our call-ins. We try and aim for 4 call-ins a year, again, focusing on those who are highest risk of gun violence. And we track every week. We have a shooting review that looks at the shootings for the last 7 days, and it populates a scorecard where we can look at what is driving violence in the city of Oakland and what gangs are driving violence in the city of Oakland, so we can be hyper focused on how we address gun violence. And not only is it an effective strategy, I'll talk later when I talk about community trust, it also helps reduce over-policing communities and having an over-policing footprint in some of our areas that are impacted by violence. One thing I should say about the ceasefire approach and some of our other initiatives, it has assisted with the reduction of violence in the city of Oakland. So to give you a quick just rundown of our violent crime on the year end of 2022, overall gun violence, particularly homicides and injury-related firearm assaults, were down 22% at the end of 2022 compared to 2021. 2021 by far was our highest year. It's our highest homicide rate at 134. With an additional 605 injury shootings, which was probably the highest, I'd say, in the last 10 plus years. So the following year, we went from a total of 739 homicides and injury shootings in 21 to a total of 576 homicides and injury shootings in 2022. We are still higher than where we were in 2019, which was one of our lower years. 2018 by far being the lowest year in homicides and injury-related shootings. To give you a standard of comparison, we ended 2022 again at 576. In 2018, we ended the 2018 year at 351. So although we are down from 2021, we still have work to do with reducing gun violence. But again, looking at some of our other crime categories compared to the previous year, our robberies were slightly down by 3%. And where we saw our biggest increases were in motor vehicle theft. We were up 5%, and we are up 10% with burglaries, with auto burglaries and commercial burglaries driving the crimes from last year. But that to say is, I think as we came out of the pandemic, we stayed steadfast on our ceasefire approach and our violent crime, and it absolutely has an impact to violence, particularly when we're able to use all the measurements and tools within ceasefire. A couple other crime strategies before we move on to the next slide that I want to talk about is we have two kind of philosophies on crime reduction. One is intel-based strategy. Again, I talked about ceasefire, but it's not just ceasefire. We want to be super focused when we are addressing crime. In my experience, when you engage in random policing, you get random results. You don't really get a positive outcome, and you run the risk of over-policing communities, which end up having increases in disparities and stops. So we don't do random policing. Everything we do is data-driven and informed, which is supported by our intelligence approach. And then we have a precision-based approach. So sometimes where an intelligence-driven philosophy or strategy in violence prevention or even other crime prevention is about information on what you know, on who or what vehicles are involved in the crime trends. Precision-based is trying to apply services to an area that might not have an individual, but might have a certain crime trend. So for example, dangerous driving. It could be a precision-based strategy where we might look at the high injury networks, and if we're not going to engage in intelligence-led enforcement, we can engage in precision-based enforcement and employ traffic enforcement in areas where we're seeing communities impacted by high incidents of dangerous driving, driving fatalities, or other reckless driving or distracted driving in those areas. And so we try and, again, use a data-driven approach to be informed of where we utilize our personnel in enforcement. Again, two other significant pieces of our crime reduction strategy is our Violent Crime Operations Center, which houses our crime reduction team officers, or what we refer to as our ops teams. If we can just go back a slide, I'm sorry for, thank you. Which houses our ops teams. They do pick up on other violent crime and violent offenders that may not fall under the ceasefire category. We also have our Crime Gun Intelligence Center and our task force operations officers, which partner with our federal task force, our U.S. Marshals, our alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, our DEA. And they certainly work on gun crimes and violent offender apprehension. So those are close collaborators with us. We also use another data-driven approach by engaging in comprehensive casing collection. So if we do get gunfire, that's not just an injury shooting, but shootings where there might be no injuries, but certainly a lot of shooting, a lot of gunfire. We will collect casings. We will enter them into our IBIS system, and our IBIS system then analyzes the casings. Each casing can have a fingerprint, so to speak, and it's its own profile consistent with the gun that's fired, and we're able to link casings and see if there's other shooting incidents throughout the city that might be connected. And so our CJIC does what we call a NIBIN analysis, which is analysis into those casings that provides some kind of linkage on how best to deploy. And for those that are monitoring, NIBIN stands for the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. So it's a way to, again, link those casings and conduct proactive enforcement in a very strategic manner. Going to slide 2, thank you. Stay on this slide if you will, for the number 2 priority, improve community engagement and strengthen community trust. Some initiatives we've done is we've certainly expanded our de-escalation training and offer de-escalation training to our community members. We have a VirTra system, which is our virtual training system to support our de-escalation tactics. We have incorporated de-escalation into our use of force policy. And I know, especially in what's going on right now in policing in this moment, we've also incorporated into our use of force policy prior to this moment, our duty to intervene requirements when it comes to use of force. We have hosted community events that encourage participation by not only residents, but OPD employees. Some of these events include block cleanups, trunk or treat for Halloween, our citywide community tours, and our conversations towards solutions. And we actually wrapped up our year last year with our Toys for the Town, a holiday event, where we were able to give out more than 2,000 gifts donated from members of the police department as well as community members. And we're able to host over 2,300 children and adults that took part in the event over the course of that day. So definitely a lot of very focused community engagement to try and build those relationships between our staff and our community. I think another piece to talk about when it comes to strengthening community trust and engagement goes back to our strategies for enforcement. I touched on it earlier about trying to be surgical with how we apply our enforcement strategies without over policing communities. And it's been a very important part of our strategies, not only for negotiated settlement agreement compliance, but again, with building trust with our communities. And what we've seen, if you go back to just to 2015, when we look at the volume of stops we were engaged in that year, I think the total for African-American stops was well over 20,000 stops just in 2015. When you fast forward to today, we're closer to 2,000 stops in a year. So it's a 90% reduction, close to a 90% reduction in the amount of individuals or African-American individuals that were being stopped when we look at where we were just about 8 years ago. And for our Hispanic population, again, about 8 years ago, we were seeing about 7,500 plus stopped. And now we are, again, closer to about 2,000, which is a 75% reduction when you look at the number of stops per year. Although I always say we got work to do in disparity, we have seen not only a reduction in footprint through our strategies to build up not only a successful crime prevention strategy, but also a strategy that doesn't, again, over police the community and builds trust with the community. And the correlated disparities have reduced along with the overall numbers. So I think that is something that from our overall philosophy of policing has helped work on community trust. Some of our other accountability measures do live in the Bureau of Risk Management. As far as coordination is concerned, I mentioned it earlier in our structure. Our regular audits, our internal investigations to ensure organizational accountability, and not only our own audits and accountability, but strengthening our relationships with our police commission, as well as our city's Office of Inspector General to ensure that we're not only holding ourselves accountable, that there's a sense of independence from our outside stakeholders and oversight to, again, reinforce community trust. From the training aspect, we make sure that we have not only rooted procedural justice training in our academies, but to continue additional trainings, for example, our Project Reset, which is providing disparity training within our organization to our internal staff, is again a strategy to, again, focus on building community relationships and community trust. Next slide, please. So developing and fostering high quality, involved, respected workforce. We do have a employee recognition program. We do have multiple awards programs throughout the year where we do recognize officers for noteworthy activity. And it's not just enforcement activity, their activity for life-saving measures, activity for engagement with the community. And I think it's important to ensure that we recognize our staff and reinforce the good work that they're doing so others may see and others may follow suit. I know the chief and the executive command staff push out regular video updates and staff updates, either in person at lineups or through trend reports to our membership to make sure that they stay informed, as well as we've implemented various leadership training programs. We recognized earlier in the year that there was a gap with our new supervisors, so newly promoted sergeants. They receive academic classroom training, but we really didn't have an avenue for them to actually get hands-on training under another senior supervisor to equip them with hands-on practical experience. So we implemented a supervisor or sergeant field training program. We have been setting up trainings through some of our nationally recognized training cadres, such as our women leaders in law enforcement, our International Association of Chiefs of Police, Major City Chiefs, as well as the Police Executive Research Forum leadership training to ensure that our senior and executive commanders, as well as some of our senior lieutenants, are going through these trainings and learning best practices and bringing them back to the organization for individual development. I also, it's not listed on the slide, but want to also give Dr. Suttle an opportunity to talk about some of our efforts around health and wellness. So Director Suttle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chief Allison. So OPD continues to place an emphasis on health and wellness for all employees, which includes adding resources to our health and wellness unit. The department has designed the health and wellness unit to be the centralized location to access wellness-related resources. And some of those resources include access to MHN, or Managed Health Network, which is a resource for sworn personnel that provides services such as counseling and therapy, problem solving, legal services, childcare, and elder assistance services. OPD has also finalized its wellness app, which will be deployed to all employees in the near future. And this will allow our employees to have immediate access to services at their fingertips. That app includes self-assessments related to physical, mental, and emotional health, and resources that address personal needs of the employee, and also needs related to their family, including alcohol, depression, PTSD, stress, resilience, adult ADHD, adverse childhood experiences. So anything that we believe our staff and their family members may need, that app will allow them to access those resources immediately. They can also look for a therapist. We've also enhanced our peer support training. The app will also include information related to our chaplain support. We also have our department psychotherapist who does critical incident stress debriefs for all of our employees after critical incidents. We are also in partnership with Kaiser for a first responder pilot program. The department has also upgraded the wellness unit in the police administration building so that our employees have access to health education, lifestyle skills, and other wellness-related information. It's also a place for our employees to meditate and decompress before and after work or during their breaks. The department is also in the process of developing a wellness center at the Eastmont Station and at the Communications Division, because we understand that this information, that all of our employees should have access to this information, not just those who are stationed at the PAB. And again, we provide training to our peer support team members to better equip them to assist employees in a crisis. We are also requiring all of our staff assigned to the wellness unit to participate in a training so that they have a wellness certification, because we see this as another way of adding legitimacy to our wellness program. So those are just some of the things that we are doing in order to address the mental, physical, and emotional health of our OPD employees.
Thank you, Director Suttle. Next slide, please. Next priority is to demonstrate sustained compliance with the negotiated settlement agreement. It is worth noting that for the first time in history, we did reach sustainability. Unfortunately, as you're all aware, we did have our case management conference just the last Tuesday. We were taken out of compliance on Task 5, which governs our internal affairs investigations. And we have some work to do when it comes to shoring up that process with deliverables that were released in the public conclusion and recommendations reports that the judge mentioned in that case management conference. With that, for the remaining tasks that we have, there are 11 of them. We do have processes in place to continue to actively monitor, not only on our own, but with collaboration with the monitoring team. Those processes internally for us, we stood up a use of force review team that conducts monthly checks on our uses of force. We meet, we make adjustments, hold accountable, as well as offer up training for anything we find in those reviews. We do biweekly checks on areas or tasks that are still outstanding through our OIA. We also have a IED case audit and review team. In addition, we do have monthly risk management meetings. So if you recall, I had mentioned some of our deployment strategies. I talked a little bit about stop data and disparities. Those numbers are regularly assessed throughout the entire organization. Each month is either dedicated to the areas in patrol or our special operations teams like ceasefire, our CROs, our Violent Crime Operations Center, or CID, and then another month is geared towards a citywide comparative meeting. But each month we are going and rotating quarter to quarter those three reviews, and those reviews not just include stop data, but we look at any disparity with force or just general increases in force, and our force is categorized into different levels, the more serious being level 1, which are officer involved shootings, or the lower levels of force, still important, but are what we call lower force, which is our level 4s and everything in between. So we have the ability to look at that, look for outliers, do drill ups, which is looking at the force from a perspective of strategic deployment or leadership issues, or drill downs to any individual outliers when it comes to force. And we can also do the same with stop data, with complaints, with vehicle collisions, with pursuits. And so every month we're looking at those numbers, we're looking at the outliers, we are meeting with our commanders and then prescribing any kind of adjustments that we need, whether they're policy adjustments, strategy adjustments, accountability measures, if it's a disciplinary matter, or any kind of intervention methods that we need, retraining, monitoring, so on and so forth. So those are some of the things that we're doing within the organization to, again, demonstrate and continue compliance with the negotiated settlement agreement. Next slide. And this is our final priority, prepare for the future of police service delivery. We are working with Macro. I know this is continues to be a conversation with the community, and it's something that it's important to us to make sure that we support Macro and ensure that we get the calls for service that fall under their areas of responsibility. And we certainly work closely with Manager Jones to ensure the success of the program, and are meeting with them on a regular basis through our communications division and making any adjustments we need. I know Director Sull does have regular contact with our Macro manager and to ensure support of that program. And then we are in communication with the Oakland Unified School District on a response to school-related crimes. What we did see at the beginning of the school year is increases in violent crime, particularly shooting violence on our campuses or around our campuses, which presented a concern and challenge. And in response, I know the chief engaged in conversation with the school district on how we can collaborate on school safety. And before I come off this slide, I want to turn again over to Deputy Director Sull, because I think it's important to talk a little bit about our recruitment as we again prepare for the future of service delivery. So Director Sull.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Allison. So as part of the department's enhanced recruitment strategies, our staff attended 90 outreach events in 2022. This is an approximate 10% increase from the events that were attended in 2021. The department has also joined the 30 by 30 initiative, which is a coalition of police leaders, researchers, and professional organizations who have joined together to advance the representation and experiences of women in all ranks of policing across the nation. The goal is to advance women in policing by 30% by the year 2030. The Recruiting and Background Unit has also strengthened its collaborative relationships with diverse organizations such as the LGBT Community Center in Oakland, Campus Pride, Professional Diversity Network, the LGBT Connect, Out and Equal, the Black Career Network, and Women for Hire. The department also continues to use social media advertising as one of the most effective ways to attract a diverse pool of qualified candidates. During the background process, we do ask candidates how they found out about the position for which they have applied, and the overwhelming majority of them say through social media advertising. It is important to mention that although we have increased our recruitment efforts, even with those increased recruitment efforts, the department has found it difficult to recruit qualified candidates. And this is not something that is unique to OPD. This is a challenge that law enforcement across the country is experiencing right now. However, in our effort to attract more candidates, we are currently updating the department's website so that we can make it more attractive and user-friendly for candidates. We continue to expand our partnerships with colleges, including Merritt College and their Law Enforcement Police Academy, and other universities throughout the county and the country. We have staff from our recruiting and background unit who are actually this weekend on their way to attend HBCUs in Southern California so that we can recruit there as well. We've also going to continue to expand our marketing and advertising campaigns to attract a larger pool of candidates from a more diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds. And we continue to recruit our police cadets because that is a feeder program into our police officer training program, and just continuing to recruit for all of our positions at local colleges.
Thank you, Director Suttle. Next slide, please. I will say before I move into our partnership with DVP that we do have 2 academies in session now for our recruitment, and we are recruiting for our next upcoming academy here, which would be the 92nd, I should say, Recruit Academy. I'll touch very briefly on the slide with our partnership with DVP. I know I covered it in earlier slides, but we do work very closely on our ceasefire strategies, particularly around our direct communication and the homicide triangle response. We work closely with our victim services to ensure that victims are connected, particularly victims of violent crime are connected with the resources and services. We partner on the violence interrupter training, and we are coordinating with DVP on our response to school violence. Next slide. And then this is the last slide before I'll turn it over for questions. Really, the slide is, I can sum it up into the biggest challenge at OPD is obviously capacity versus expectations, our ability to try and get as much of the work done that's expected from our community and from our city leadership, as well as the department. We have a lot of different kind of specialized initiatives that we work on that I mentioned earlier when I talked about the organizational structure, but certainly trying to ensure that we stay focused on violent crime with the violent crime trends that we've been seeing, trying to stay collaborative with our justice system partners. Certainly the policing is not the only piece of the justice system pie. We certainly have our restorative pieces, our rehabilitation pieces, the courts, the district attorney and prosecution. And so making sure that we're all collaborating together and working together in this moment, particularly when we've seen increases in violence over the last couple of years, but making sure that we at least apply the appropriate resources to address violence. Again, recruitment and retention. We talked about recruiting. Our staffing does present a challenge. I know that I've talked in past presentations that even with our current staff numbers, when you compare our staff with violent crime nationally, we are an agency that sits at the top where you see more violent crime numbers in comparison or ratio to the number of police officers. So what that translates into is the more crime concerns per officer, the more the workload, the more time it takes to follow on an investigation or complete a response in patrol or in the community. And again, going back to our priority 1 numbers that are numbering about 7 per hour that are serious crimes. just kind of speaks to the call volume that we see in the city. And one violent crime obviously can't be handled by one officer. A lot of the times it takes many officers to address a violent crime scenario when you're dealing with evidence collection or talking to witnesses or providing life-saving measures or trying to apprehend an individual that has committed the crime. The utilization of technology, certainly I always believe that, when you bring resources to address crime from a police department perspective, and I'm not necessarily talking about the other support pieces like restorative justice or community partnerships, but just internally, organizationally, you kind of run off of having police officers being able to respond, or you leverage technology. And so when we talk about challenges of technologies, is trying to find the appropriate technology, how to use technology in a way that is going to be effective towards violence prevention and crime prevention, but also supports public trust as well as public privacy, and then obviously funding some of these technologies. So we have things like case management systems that we would need for investigation purposes, our auto plate reader program, and there's also another type of plate reader program that are a fixed plate reader program, which we do not have, but has been effective in public safety in the form of violence investigations, other infrastructure support or capital support, I should say, with air support, Star Chase, different technologies, and trying to leverage them in a way that's the most effective in crime prevention. I talked a little bit about morale, which is the retention piece of it, but we have seen, just from a perspective, although it was certainly a big challenge in 2022, early 22, when we were seeing about 9 sworn members attrition out of the organization per month, in collaboration with the administration and the city council approved MOU. We have seen a reduction in attrition down to about 4 per month, but certainly it's something that we always have to pay attention to because it could obviously impact and adjust staffing numbers. And then the final, which I started with at the very beginning, is just the volume of calls that came in, and then our volume of response. Again, all those things really translate to sum up this final challenge is expectations, our capacity to meet those expectations under our given and existing responsibilities. I know I've been talking for a long time and I had a lot to cover. I try to sum it up as best I can. I can turn it over now, Council President, for questions.
Thank you, Chief Allison.